Even though these are strangers,
complete strangers,
and you're essentially homeless,
yes,
you're happier,
yes,
for this one night with these strangers. Isn't that really? That's very telling.
Yeah, I used to hide my anger kind of quite well, but I was so angry that I hit this door in the house and my fist went through it.
Oh my goodness!
I've still got the scar now. I cut on my arm. If you've been racially abused, you don't forget stuff like that.
No.
I remember each one of those times.
Yeah.
Hi everyone, welcome to the Great in You podcast. My name's Steven Panter and I will normally be hosting this podcast. We've done a previous episode that tells you about what the podcast is, but this first one is a little bit unique because this one's about me and my story, and it'll give you a lot of insight really into why I want to do the podcast, why I want to speak to people that have experienced trauma in their lives and now they help other people. So today my good friend and colleague Liz Folan, who's a positive psychologist and works really closely with our trust as well, the Great Schools Trust, around supporting students around positive psychology. She's going to be the person interviewing me today and finding out about my story and hopefully from that people will watch subsequent episodes. So thanks very much for joining us, and hi Liz.
Hi Steve, and thank you for giving me this lovely privileged role to ask you the questions and turn it on you today, because I think that having discussed your background with you before, I think listeners are going to be in for such a treat, but also it's a really moving story. When I came away from you sharing your story with me the first time, I found it was very impactful, and it made absolute sense. I know Steve Jobs says you can only tell your life by joining the dots backwards.
Yes.
And when we sat together in Sefton Park recently and you were telling me about your life, it made absolute sense why you are where you are today.
Yes. Yeah.
So what I want to do is just first of all, I think this is going to be the standard protocol in this podcast, find out a little bit about your background, and I want you to maybe share with us what was your childhood like growing up, your early childhood?
Yeah. I don't really remember a lot before I was kind of 3. I've got some kind of early childhood memories, and all that kind of was around kind of my mum,
right?
My maternal mum. I was adopted later on, but I'll come to that. So that it kind of, my early childhood memories, if you like, kind of are around that kind of, from about 3 years onwards. Quite challenging, really. I went through quite a difficult, my early years were quite difficult. It was I was brought up with a stepfather and 4 step siblings.
They were your father's children?
Half siblings,
yeah. Okay.
Yeah. And obviously, that didn't go particularly well.
Where were you in the rank?
I was the middle, so out of the
okay.
5, the middle child. Quite quickly, social services became involved.
Oh dear.
And due to the behaviour of my stepfather, he was kind of, what you'd call now kind of far right, but at the time kind of a neo-Nazi kind of, character. And obviously, I say stepfather, but I wouldn't give him that title really, because he wasn't very kind to us, to the children. He physically abused me. He broke my arm when I was 3.
He broke your arm?
Broke my arm, yeah. And I do kind of vaguely remember passing him a newspaper, and that's when social care became involved.
Oh.
So yeah.
I'm so sorry.
Yeah, I mean it's strange because you don't. It's like you're so kind of disconnected from it because it was such a long time ago. I mean, I'm 47 now, but you know that it's happened, and obviously the work that I do now, which we'll come to later on, sometimes you look at it with that lens on. But yeah, he was physically aggressive. Obviously, me and my brother we had a dad that was Indonesian, from an Asian background.
Yeah.
So we were kind of had darker skin to the other kids.
So you looked different. You were othered.
Yeah. So if you can imagine somebody with those neo-Nazi kind of,
that
that kind of, background, and, shouldn't really, if you've got those views and those shouldn't really be around children really. And obviously expressing those views
Verbally,
verbally,
yeah.
racially. I don't really remember anything that he called me or anything like that, but I do know, subsequently from looking into it, that's what happened. Physically aggressive, obviously, towards me, broke my arm. That's when social care became involved, and then they found that he'd actually been sexually abusing my sister.
Oh my goodness.
So obviously not a good character. He was the father of the two younger siblings.
That's all. And this was the person who was supposedly your male role model.
Yeah,
at a very impressionable time in your life.
Yeah. So my dad wasn't on the scene. I don't really know a lot of the background of why he wasn't on the scene and stuff like that. But obviously, my mum felt that, for some reason, she couldn't care for us. So me and my brother were put up for adoption.
So just the two of you, the others were kept?
Just the two of us, yeah.
Right.
Yeah, just the two of us, yeah.
So you already had separation from your siblings at this stage?
Just before 4.
Oh.
On about the 4-year-old kind of mark. I was then sent to live with the auntie of the perpetrator, as we would call in our kind of field.
So let me get you right here. The auntie of the stepdad who
Yes.
had perpetrated the
Yeah.
abuse. The auntie. Oh
The
my
auntie,
goodness.
Yeah. Which wouldn't happen these days, would it?
Not at all.
It wouldn't
That's
happen.
ridiculous.
Yeah. So obviously I was sent to live there.
Yeah.
Apparently, from what I gather, my mum tried to visit in the early stages, but then I've spoken to my mum, from being kind of 18 onwards, which I'll come to for a little period of time, and she said that she wasn't allowed to come and see me.
By whom?
By my foster carers, if you like.
Right.
So it was a strange situation.
Yeah.
I was taken from that situation, which obviously wasn't a great one.
No.
Put into a family where I looked different to them. Look different to everybody in that community, really.
Yeah.
You watch these stories, don't you, about identity and people that have got kind of browner skin and stuff like that. So I was put into that family, probably because they already had an adopted daughter, and they obviously wanted another child. I remember that time and that period, and then quite quickly, we moved to another area, in another place. I think probably in summary, my adoptive father really tried, of supporting.
And to bond with you?
And to bond with me,
Yeah.
we used to go and get football, used to be into football and used to buy me books and things like that, really, really tried to
So you have good memories?
Yeah, there's some good memories there, yeah.
Yeah.
But it was quite a kind of, again, quite an aggressive at times household. I think, you look back at it as an adult, and you've obviously got a different viewpoint, but that was your life, you were around.
You didn't know any different?
No. I had a foster mum, if you like, that was never physically tactile or never said, I love you and any of that stuff. I've got a son myself now, and every time I finish a phone call, I say I love you.
Yeah.
Nobody teaches you that. That's just what you have to do.
Yeah.
And nobody really taught me that. I had an adoptive sister, and I think when I first went there, I imagine it. It was quite kind of a, I don't know. I don't really know how to describe it. Maybe it was exciting for them to have this new, child that was on the scene. But my adoptive sister was, at the time, I remember, quite problematic. She ran away from home.
How much older?
I think I was about, she was probably about 8 years older than me.
Okay, so she
maybe she was maybe 13, 14.
Right, yeah.
And she had a boyfriend at the time, and she ran away from home.
Oh God, yeah.
So I remember this is something I remember really vaguely. I remember it was on the radio that she'd gone missing.
Oh, so it was serious.
Yeah. And I'm like maybe 5 or 6 maybe.
Whoa.
And I remember saying, oh, she's famous. And I remember getting the biggest smack across the face.
Oh.
Like you'd ever, and I remember it now.
You remember that vividly.
Yeah,
so that's a core memory of yours as well.
That was from my adoptive mum, yeah. That's a real kind of core memory of mine, yeah.
Wow.
And that was me just being an innocent child going, she's, and obviously they were worried and stressed about the situation.
And that's how she reacted.
Yeah.
So
she was that kind of character, quite
stern by the sounds of things, yeah.
No kind of physical love.
Did they have lots of rules and kind of
Yeah, I remember being, things like Christmases and birthdays and stuff. You were given presents, and that was nice. I remember as a kid, sometimes you break things, don't you? I remember
Yeah.
breaking a skateboard on a curb when I'd first got it and
Yeah.
stuff. And I remember, really quite strict. Things like food as well. Like food was kind of, I won't say there wasn't food in the house, but it was
Yeah.
limited.
Like rationed.
Almost, yeah. I wasn't allowed. Like my son now can go into the cupboards and just have what he wants.
They never stopped, do they?
No, they never
At
stopped
that
eating.
age.
Yeah, but I remember that being a thing, and I was made to kind of do all the chores and clean up, and I was grounded all the time. I wasn't allowed to go out.
What were you being grounded for?
Just
Petty kind
stuff.
of.
Yeah, petty stuff. So I felt very disconnected. I didn't feel
from them,
despite my adoptive dad doing some of that stuff.
Yeah.
And I felt he was, probably with regards to my foster mum, he was probably in a bit of conflict with himself around, But I remember at times both of them being quite aggressive. And,
Yeah.
I was kind of. There's quite a few like racial slurs as well, things that were said about the
Directed
colour of the
at you?
skin, yeah, like the P word and stuff like that.
Oh God.
Which was obviously, you don't expect that. You want to
No,
feel
not-
safe.
I mean,
This is your
supposed to be
second.
your
This is your
home.
second
Yeah.
home, by the way. It's not your
Yeah.
first home. So stuff like that, And at the time, I didn't really know where I was from and what my ethnicity
Never
was,
clue.
and all of that stuff. So that kind of stuff was.
And in this area, were you still an outsider? In the school playground, having moved here.
Yeah, I mean, I went to one primary school for a little bit of time, and then we quickly moved to another area. So I do remember going to that primary school and having friends, and I'm
Yeah.
still connected to one of them now, actually, one or two of them. And then I moved to another school, which was in another area. But I remember that even my dad, my adopted dad, he was like unemployed for a period of time. There wasn't a lot of money. The home conditions and stuff weren't great.
Yeah.
It wasn't. It's hard to think of many positives, really, when I
Yeah,
look back.
wow.
When I look
Yeah.
at my life and I look at
And what you have now, how you provide.
yeah, not
for
necessarily
your
even
son.
what you have, but the standard of living and
Yeah.
that type of thing. So,
But it was normalised, I suppose, to you at the time. You
Yeah.
didn't know. Did you feel different, with your home
Yeah.
circumstances when you went
I mean,
to
I don't think
children's?
I don't think I was very well, like my clothes and stuff. I don't think I had the smartest clothes. I don't think I was clean and stuff. I always used to, have baths and all that kind of stuff. But I don't think I was, I think I was maybe bullied a little bit in the early years for that.
Because of the neglect.
Yeah. And neglect has a spectrum, doesn't it?
Yeah.
But definitely emotionally, I didn't fit in. Identity-wise, I didn't have any people that looked like me.
Yeah.
I was in a situation that I didn't ask to be put in, but I was
Yeah,
put in.
and a crucial part of your development, all
Yeah.
of these times,
Yeah.
when you were
When you
three,
think about
having
child
that,
development,
yeah.
yeah.
And your primary school years.
Yeah.
So after your primary school years, did you stay there to go to secondary school? Were
Yeah.
you with this family all the
Yeah,
time?
I was with
for
them
your...
till I was kind of 15, 16.
So what were your teenage years like? Did they improve at all?
Yeah, I mean, just going back to my early childhood, just briefly before we go on to
Yeah.
that, I remember kind of being woken up in the middle of the night because I hadn't done stuff that I was asked to do.
How old were you then?
Probably 7 or 8, that type of age.
Woken up
in the middle of the night and
to be told to do
taken
something like do the
downstairs
hoovering or...
because I hadn't washed up properly. Or
Oh,
hadn't done,
you're joking.
yeah, and I used to, obviously a lot of kids
That's
that have,
abuse.
yeah. So a lot of kids that have experienced trauma, they have issues with kind of bedwetting and stuff like that. And I did for a few years in my early years. And I remember that, I remember being part of that was probably the fear that and that happened not just once, it happened a few times.
And were you told off? Were you punished for that as
Yeah,
well?
yeah. So I was constantly being kind of punished and I had a good imagination as a kid. I used to play a lot and I had friends outside and I wanted to be out of the house. You know, that was where I was happiest with my friends.
And safest.
Yeah.
It sounds like you were hyper vigilant all the time when you were in that household.
Of course, yeah. Because if you've been racially abused, you don't forget stuff like that.
No.
I remember each one of those times.
Yeah.
I was racially abused by somebody at school as well in middle school. I remember the lad's name. I remember when it happened. I remember how I felt when it happened.
Yeah, you never forget how you feel.
I didn't really know who I was, from an identity point of view, my heritage. So I was like I didn't really have an answer to it, and but going back to kind of middle school. I went to middle school.
So
I
was
was
that
very,
from 11 to 13 or?
yeah. I was very sociable, you know, very, very sociable. I had a lot of friends. I was kind of the funny one.
So
You
that
know, I
was like a
used humour.
coping mechanism.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and that was to bring people in. I wanted people to like me, you know, and I used humour. I was in with all the popular boys. I wasn't, you know, as I say, you know, the hardest kid, or you know, somewhere kind of in the middle somewhere. But I was in with all the popular boys because
Like
and
a
girls,
cheeky chappy.
cheeky chappy. You know, humour was a thing. You know, I used humour a lot. You know, to kind of navigate, I suppose.
To
You know.
diffuse, I suppose, as
Yeah,
well,
yeah.
and disarm people.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I probably still do that now. Sometimes, you know,
But
that's.
humour can also be a superpower.
Of
I
course
mean,
it
it can
can.
be.
Yeah,
It has
yeah.
it clearly been for you.
Yeah, of course I can.
But did it get you into trouble as well? I wonder.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I mean, I started.
Can be overused.
I remember going to the primary school. I was in all the top sets. I remember a conversation. Somebody saying he's very bright,
Yeah.
and I went in all the top sets. You know, like I was in all the top classes. You know, and in my primary school, I was. You could tell that they wanted to work with me. I was bright. You know.
Yeah.
I think sometimes intelligence, when you've been through attachment and trauma issues, that's a superpower in a way that if you need to get out of a situation or if you need to,
You're thinking on your feet.
Your intelligence is really key.
Yeah.
But when I went to middle school, I was in all the top sets, and then, you know, obviously I had good relationships. Bit of a clown in school, you know, messed around. I've spoken to teachers in later life, you know, and left, and it was, you know, the kind of consensus is I wasn't somebody that was kind of hated by the staff.
Yeah.
Probably frustrated.
Yeah.
Probably, you know, my sense of humour and wanting to be liked and wanting to be the class clown. It was probably frustrating at times for teaching staff, and, you know, I was one of those kids. But big character and, you know.
And likable.
Yeah.
Likable. And
Yeah.
that's the thing that you carry through to today.
Yeah.
You know, that's what, you know, drives you, I think. And
Well, I'll let others be the judge.
yeah, no, but like I can say that personally because I know you.
Yeah,
you know,
course,
and I know that you're well liked.
Yeah,
You know, you've got a good sense of humour.
Yeah, humour's important.
Yeah.
I think it's, you know, it's still important to me now, and, you know, really important. But yeah, I mean, I started off in all the top sets, and I think what you didn't have in schools at the time was you didn't have safeguarding leads.
No.
You didn't have mental health workers.
So we're talking about what, the 90s, early 90s?
Yeah, 1991, probably 90.
Yeah.
Yeah, probably
okay.
90.
Yeah, none of that was there. No safe.
None of that was in
safety
place.
rails at
You
all.
were seen as maybe a naughty child, you know, and as a result, I think I went down and down in the sets.
Yeah.
And I think when you kind of realise that nobody's got any hope for you, it's kind of a self-fulfilling prophecy, isn't it? And you're like, you know, and I remember, you
It's
know,
a downward spiral.
Yeah, misbehaving at school, that would come into the home. I would get grounded. There'd be some physical, you know, altercations and stuff. You know, I was hitting things like that. I remember one incident where I was asked to stay in the house, and I was so angry. You know, I used to hide my anger kind of quite well, but I was so angry that I hit this door in the house and my fist went through it.
Oh my
and
goodness!
I've still got the scar now. I cut all my arm. And
I see it.
Yeah,
is that the scar from the door?
Still there, yeah, still there. And I remember being on my own in the house and having this blood pouring down my arm.
What age were you then?
Probably the similar age, probably about 11, 12. Just so frustrated at
not knowing what to do with that big
feeling.
feeling.
Being punished and being, you know.
This sense of injustice.
Yeah. And I remember walking around because we lived in like a back-to-back house, you know, and I took my son there recently actually to show him where I was brought up. And there was a house at the front. It's like a 2 up, 2 down, but back to back, and then like an alleyway, and then there was a house at the front. I remember going out to the neighbour at the front, this Indian guy, and he said, "Oh, I'll go and get you a plaster." It was just like this. But most importantly, I remember making the excuse that I tripped over the dog.
Oh, okay, so you had to lie to cover it up.
Yeah. So I remember being bitten by a dog, one of our dogs, and because of the chaos and because of the anger in the house, and dogs just just remember like the home conditions not being
so
nice.
Unsafe. I mean, physically unsafe, but emotionally unsafe,
so
psychologically unsafe.
The racial stuff, the physically emotional, and some neglect, low level neglect as well. So but going back to what you were saying about kind of what it was like in school, it was hard in school because you kind of shut down a little bit. If you feel that they're almost predicting your future for you, one of those kids that maybe they'd see as, well, he's not going to achieve anything in his life. He's not going to.
Did you actually feel that? Did you feel that was kind of a sentence
I think so,
from overhearing, he's bright, he's in the top set, he's doing well.
And that
and then
started
suddenly
to kind
there's a
of
slide.
reduce. And
Yeah.
I think that was down to what I had going on at home. You know, I
Yeah.
think if I felt like I was flourishing, I know that's a word you use.
Yeah, I love the
all
word
the
flourishing
time.
because it's an important word.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and we said, didn't we, when we met, I was languishing, but you said actually it's
No,
far
you were
deeper.
beyond. No, languishing is when you're stuck.
Yeah.
You were below languishing.
Yeah,
You
yeah.
know, you were in neglect.
Yeah.
And you were on a downward spiral.
Yeah.
So, which actually makes your upward spiral all the more remarkable.
Yeah.
When we look at where you were then.
Yeah.
I mean, that's so from your childhood to your teens to, like, you left school. Did you do your GCSEs? Did you do exams?
No, I remember being asked to leave school before my exams. So
invited
to leave, which obviously, you know, wouldn't really happen now. You'd be encouraged as much as possible to take your exams, you know. But because my behaviour was escalating and spiralling, I think at that point, from being about probably 14 onwards, I was starting to hang around in the wrong crowds. I was starting to, you know, hang around in the community with people that were maybe not a positive influence.
But you're looking for that family, aren't you?
Yeah,
you're looking for that
yeah.
validation, that social connection, which is essential.
Yeah, I had
especially at that age.
In the neighbourhood, I had two really good friends that were like a positive influence, and some of the others weren't.
Yeah.
So a friend that I'm still friends with now, called Rob. I'm off to his daughter's wedding actually in a couple
lovely,
of weeks.
yeah.
So we're still, you know, from being 7 or 8 years old, still good friends. And he came to my wedding and stuff, you know, and you know, but he was a real positive. You know, I used to. It's funny when you come from that kind of household, and you know, you go to other people's houses. You know, I used to go to, you know, Rob's house, and you know, I used to feel kind of like a warmer kind of feeling. I used to go to friends' houses for dinner. I had a good friend in school called Paul, and I was, obviously as kids you get invited round to. I was in high school, you know. I went to a really good high school, an all boys kind of grammar school, you know. But it just didn't work out for me, you know. But I remember going to people's houses and just having that warmer feeling of it being nicer, and you know, nicer food and nicer parents, and just everything just being a bit nicer, you know, and being attracted to that, and thinking, oh, why, you know, like, I remember going home and thinking, why haven't I got that kind of, you know, home and household and stuff.
That's heartbreaking.
Yeah.
And that's when you see it more acutely, isn't it? When you're comparing.
Yeah, you compare, you do.
Because prior to that,
yeah,
it was normal for you.
You get kids in school, obviously, and this happens to most kids that rock up with the best trainers and the best. And I wasn't one of those kids, you know, because of the income and stuff like that. But you know, in the spirit of balance, you know, I wouldn't say I wasn't looked after in a sense, but it was just the way I was.
But it sounds to me like it was your basic needs were met.
Yes.
You know, shelter, food.
Yeah.
But then if we look at Maslow's hierarchy of needs, we talk about Maslow and the social scientist, psychologist.
Absolutely.
You know, you want to get to self-actualization, which is like happiness and flourishing.
Wasn't in a position where I could thrive.
You weren't. You were here at the bottom, but you weren't really having your relationship needs met.
Yeah.
You weren't getting love.
No.
You weren't getting support in that sense. You weren't getting you weren't in a psychologically safe space.
Yeah. I remember thinking, you know, I was decent at football when I was a kid and quite good at sport. I was a fast runner. I was good at football. I was never in the football teams because I never felt like, I don't know, I was never encouraged in that sense.
Yeah.
Like with my son now, he's a good runner. He was good at football. He's, you know, captain of the football team, good at boxing. Every step of the way I've tried to kind of,
you're there,
you do,
for
don't
him.
you?
Yeah,
you do, don't
there,
you?
You're
Support
just gone,
them, and I'm like,
I'll
what can I do to? This is a passion of yours. This is what you want.
Let's sign you up for the summer school. Let's get you in the after school. Let's drive you in the rain. Wait outside in the freezing cold. Do all of that. Yeah,
all that stuff. And you think, you know, that's what was missing. And I think, I often think actually, I think I could have pursued some of those things. Being a,
play for LFC.
I'm not saying I'm going to, obviously I'm a Liverpool fan, but I'm not saying I would have been a professional footballer, but I think I could have taken it further with
you
more
just don't know, do
encouragement,
you?
more support, more, and I never felt that. I never felt that kind of, you know, and that came from, like, you know, these footballers that, you know, got brought up in challenging, you know, areas and communities. That was me just from the age of 6 and 7 till 14. Every single day playing football.
And that was probably an escape for you as well.
Yeah, but obviously periods where I wasn't allowed out for long periods. And I mean, to be honest with you, I used to steal things a little bit when I was a kid because I wasn't. You? Yeah, I used to go to the shop and steal things.
It's a classic cry for help.
Yeah. And it was because I wasn't, I wouldn't say I wasn't fed, but it was it wasn't,
But it's risk-taking behaviour.
risk-taking, I used to take things and, steal the odd thing, and used to get into more trouble for that.
Yeah.
But it was like this kind of,
that's it. That's
catch-22 situation, not
time.
that understanding that.
And I think for you, for your sense of self-worth and your self-esteem, you're doing the stuff that's expected of you, and you're getting evidence back from everybody around you saying, there you go, you've done that now, so therefore I'm not that worthy, therefore I don't have a good self-esteem. So what I'd love to know is how you came from being invited to leave at 16 to where you are now. I mean, there's a huge jump from that. How you left with no qualifications?
Left with nothing. When I was 16, when I was just turning 16, about a month before, around that time of being 16 anyway, there was a bit of an incident with a group of friends, and I basically took off on somebody's bike. Came to bring it back a few hours later. Just clowning around. Came to bring it back a few hours later. The police are at the door. I dumped this bike because I'm thinking I'm going to get into loads of trouble. I was worried about what's going to happen at home. Dumps this bike in the woods. The bike was taken by somebody else. The police come to the door, and I'm in trouble for stealing a bike. Theft of cycle on my record at 16.
Oh, wow.
Went to the youth courts and all of that.
Oh, yikes.
But I was asked to leave the house. That was enough for my adoptive parents. I was asked to leave.
Okay.
So at 16, just left school.
Okay, so in other words, kicked out.
Kicked out, kicked out. Which, for whatever reason, but in a way I was kind of happy. I remember thinking, this could be my chance to get away from this. Just rewind that as well a few years. I was actually adopted when I was 10.
Okay.
So I was with them for 6 years and then adopted
in
by
foster
them.
care?
No, with them, in foster care.
Yeah.
Officially adopted at 10. I remember that adoption and going to court and doing all that stuff. And I remember thinking, I suppose it became normal really to be in that household and be with these people. But I remember thinking, I don't want to be here.
When you were 10?
Yeah, I remember.
So you already had that gut feeling?
Yeah, but I didn't have the confidence.
That intuition. But why, you had no advocate. You had nobody to advocate for you. Yeah. You were too young to do it.
Voice of the child and stuff like that wasn't. So I remember just going with it, and that happened, and then. But fast forward to being 16 and being thrown out. It was very fractious. It was I was starting to push back as well.
Yeah, I bet.
14, 15, 16.
That age,
I'm hanging around with some characters as well, starting to push back.
Yeah.
Got a couple of positive influences, my friend Rob, and who come from a good family. And basically I packed my stuff. I remember getting a suitcase together. I don't remember why, but I remember... And I don't remember why this was an idea and why it happened. I don't know why I knew about it. But for some reason, I lived in Bradford, and some reason Leeds was attractive to me.
Okay. Big lights.
So 12,
big city.
12, just to put it into context.
Yeah.
Bradford from Leeds is about 13 miles.
Oh, right. Okay.
It's not a massive distance. It's a bigger
huge
city.
Leap for you.
Yeah, it's a bigger city. Probably, twice as big. Big population. I remember getting on a bus. And when I took my son back there, I took him to the bus stop, because that bus stop, to me, is a real key moment in my, because what would I have done if I hadn't have...
It's like the road less travelled, isn't it? Two
what
roads,
would I have done if I
where do you go, what route?
I remember having this big suitcase, like one that you'd take, 20 kilogram
like
suitcase.
A proper suitcase, no rucksack. Like,
full of stuff, asked to leave,
It's the real, it's the real kind of like... cliche of being thrown out with everything. That's me. That's who I am.
So thrown out. Don't know what I'm going to do. Arrives, gets the bus to Leeds. Don't even know where I got the money from or anything. Didn't have a lot of money on me, but I used to have a good work ethic when I was a kid. So I did even at kind of from about 8 or 9, I did maybe slightly older, maybe 11 or 12, but it's all, you don't remember the details, do you, sometimes? But I had a paper round in the morning. I had a milk round later on before the paper round. So
you're always getting a few bob.
I knew that I needed to get that money for myself. I knew it wasn't going to be
almost like an escape kind of pot, isn't it?
I wasn't given pocket money.
Yeah.
Like I say, my adopted dad used to, buy me things and stuff like that, which was, nice. But didn't get loads of, so I knew I had to make that for myself. So it probably came from that. I was doing weekend paper rounds. I had a good work ethic, and I got that because I knew that I needed to do that myself. Nobody would give that to me.
That was your route out as well.
Yeah.
By the sounds of things.
Yeah. So I gets on this bus and don't know where I'm going, and like goes to the local probably asked somebody when I got off the bus, where do I need some advice around where I'm going to stay tonight. So effectively homeless. Goes to this housing advice kind of centre, because I'm 16, I'm a priority. I go on this thing called Night Stop. So I was on it for 3 or 4 nights, and basically the premise of that is you go to a stranger's house who've got a spare bedroom. Obviously, hopefully they're vetted. I didn't ask that question at the time. Hopefully they're vetted. Obviously, it's just so I'm not on the streets. Goes to these people's houses, and luckily it was fine. You know, stayed in 3 or 4 different houses for almost a week. You didn't stay in there for more than one night.
Right. So there's no continuity.
There's no continuity.
So it's called night
stop, as in one night stop. You
Yeah.
know. But again, you were fed. They'd talk to you. For me, it was that warm feeling again. It was like, oh, this is nice.
Even though these are strangers,
complete strangers,
and you're essentially homeless.
Yes.
You're happier.
Yes.
For this one night with these strangers. Isn't that really? That's very telling.
Yeah. So I'm there, and that's okay. 3 or 4 nights in that. And eventually I'm put in this kind of young person's hostel after 3 or 4 nights. Didn't sleep on the streets. I was homeless, but I'm not, can't profess that I was kind of...
Yeah, but you were homeless.
Yes. Yeah.
Don't minimise it.
Yeah.
It's homelessness at the end of the day.
Yeah. And obviously I'm sent to this young person's hostel called Prospect House in a place called Beeston in Leeds. Didn't know how to get there. Was obviously directed. You get on this bus and you walk down this way and you go there.
With your big suitcase?
Big suitcase. And this is like day 5. No mobile phones, no way of being contacted, no way of me to contact. I remember the house number, actually. I still remember it now. But there's no way I was ringing that number. I'm going to see
your home number.
Yes.
Yeah.
I'm going to see what happens here and see what goes to this house. There's key workers, housing support workers, that kind of role. These couple of big guys, I remember that really, really vividly. Goes and stays there for a few weeks. Met somebody in there, met this girl who had, she was there because her relationship had broke down with her parents. She lived quite locally. And I remember kind of, her family kind of took me in. I remember visiting there. This was only after a couple of weeks, by the way. So I remember going there for tea. Again, getting that nice warm feeling.
Yeah.
And just that family kind of unit. And obviously there were problems there, but I didn't see the problems. I was just there for my tea. And, to be kind of.
Yeah. And they liked you, so the problems weren't with you.
Yeah, I think they liked me, but I think they were a bit wary of me as well. The daughter had been sent into this place.
Comes back with
suddenly there's a lad turning up for his tea.
Yeah.
But to get her home. Well, come on with this lad. But we kind of in the first kind of few days maybe it was like, oh, let's have a relationship, but it didn't turn into that. We were just friends, and so I stayed there for a few weeks. I remember just having that feeling of kind of independence. I was given small amounts of money. I had to go to the shop and get myself, food. I was buying things like, like pasta, but having butter with it and stuff like that. Beans and very basic
old,
food, noodles and all that kind of stuff.
Student type food.
Yeah. I mean, I knew how to cook because I used to cook in my adoptive home. I did a lot of the cooking and the cleaning and all that kind of stuff. So I wasn't useless in the sense, but I remember just doing that. So I was there for a few weeks anyway. That was, a bit of an adventure, if you like, met 1 or 2, undesirables in that place as well, but never got kind of taken out of there and did anything wrong or anything, criminal or anything like that. Went then to stay in kind of a semi-supported living place, and stayed there, and within the first couple of days met a girl in the local community called Katrina, who I'm still friends with now. She's a social worker. And her family, her mum and dad kind of took me in, and I used to go there for tea.
It's like a pattern, isn't it?
It's a pattern,
different families are taking you in, and you're constantly looking for that sense of home.
That family unit, Very quickly we knew again, we were just friends. It wasn't kind of a relationship thing. I think at the time, I just think I wasn't looking to get into a relationship. I was on an adventure, but again, good memories. They were really kind to me, good to me. Sue, when I took my son there last year, actually, I took my son to see Sue. It was Katrina's dad and mum. Sorry, her dad sadly passed away, but I took him to meet her.
Lovely.
Because she was somebody because I was his age.
Yeah, wow.
When I took him back, I took him at my age. It was a really
that must be so now when you see it, that's just must be so moving for you to see the age he's at and to think what you were doing when you were like him.
Yeah.
You were out there in the world
And to
by
think of him
yourself, alone.
having to do that, it's just unthinkable,
Isn't it?
It's black, it's chalk and cheese,
Yeah.
isn't it? It's,
Yeah.
So, but yeah, at the time I was in this semi-independent living. I then started to look for work. I mean, I always worked. I went to good work ethic. I went to the careers place and did all that. I remember they put me in a college for a couple of months. Again, there was an amazing woman there called Margaret, and she took me in. She looked after me. She made sure I was all right in this college. I don't even know what course it was. I don't know what the content was. I can't even remember that. But I remember having that sense of feeling welcomed and looked after. Again, another kind of female kind of figure, somebody that, you remember those people, don't you?
Like you're looking for that lost mum.
Yeah.
Because you didn't get it with the stepmom either. You had that code. So any warmth that you were getting, it was almost like you attached to it.
Yeah, you're attracted to it.
Yeah. And they probably are attracted to you because they can see that in you.
That's
that
what
loss.
you need.
That lack.
Yeah, I suppose you don't think about that when you're that age. I've never really, until you said it, I've never really thought about it like that.
Yeah.
But yeah, maybe that's what I was doing. But again, I'm just thinking it was kind of, I was always quite positive about my situation. And I think that's kind of carried me into adulthood, really. Although I'm in a situation, I'm not thinking, oh my God, I'm homeless and I'm staying in a hostel or somebody's house or somebody's thing. I'm like, it's like almost an adventure. It was better than what I'd come from.
And that's very much to do with your mindset, isn't it?
Yeah.
When we work with kids, we talk about that all the time, don't we?
And I don't know what makes you like that. I don't know.
Well, I do, because I'm a positive psychologist, and I can tell you.
For the science part.
You are actually born with a baseline for optimism or negativity or pessimism,
Okay.
But it's 50% of your genetics, 50% of your genetics, which means that, and they say about 20% roughly is... your circumstances, which means that you've got about 30% to play with. Yeah. So that's why I do the work that I do, the interventions.
Yeah.
So some people can have up to 50% that they can play with and add into to add positivity. So it sounds to me like you have a baseline. That's an optimistic baseline that you were born, whether your mum or your dad were, or people in the family. I think that's why
I don't often look backwards. I don't often worry about that.
It's good.
Because it's gone, isn't it? You can't change it. I think as I've got older, I've started to reflect on what happened and what,
I suppose as a dad,
you're
seeing every stage of your little boy's development.
Yeah.
That's when it's going to come home to you. Because I know as a mum, when I had children, that's when my childhood came back to me a lot. And I think that's common in all parents.
No, absolutely.
But I think that's for you, that's key now, isn't it? Yeah. Especially now that you've taken him back at the same age that you were at.
Yeah. I took him everywhere. So I'll come on to this in a minute, but I took him to, I thought at the time, I went to this careers thing after this college or during. I think I must have been on a short course just to kind of get me.
Like a foundation course maybe or something.
I mean, it was a couple of months maximum.
Yeah.
But I remember thinking, right, okay, you've been asked that you need to kind of find something now careers-wise. So I'm 16 and I'm like, what do I want to do? Not a clue, not thought about it. Never had a conversation when I was under 16 to say, well, what do you want to do when you get older? Nobody had ever. I have these conversations with my son all the time. What do you want to do? What do you want to? Do you want to go to college? Do you want to go? Nobody had those aspirations for me, if you know what I mean. So I had this idea. I thought, well, I'll go and work in a hairdresser's or something. It was weird. It was like, I don't know why that came about, or a barber's or something like that. Because I'll meet people.
So you knew you had social intelligence.
Yeah,
you kind of were that
self-aware.
self-aware.
People. Yeah. I don't know why that came up. I could have done anything.
Yeah.
So I goes to work in this hairdresser's. Was there for about a month. Quite a posh one. I moved to a house after this supported living and lived in a shared house. Again, exciting and all that kind of stuff in Leeds. And then I went to work in a barber's, which was kind of near where I lived, and and I took my son back there, and they remembered me.
Oh.
And I remember saying to them, when I went last year, I remember saying to them, I wasn't very good, was I? I wasn't good at sweeping up. I wasn't good at. I was probably messing about and, acting the goat. And, 16. But they remembered me, and
that's so lovely,
I took
isn't
my son
it?
back there as well on this little kind
that's
of.
testament
it's like
to
a little
you
pilgrimage.
Isn't it, though? That's testament to your personality at the time, to your optimism, to your positivity.
Yeah.
Because that's
But
what
we
people
laughed
remember.
about it. We laughed and we said, well, yeah, you weren't. And we did have to let you go, but we liked you,
Maybe they remembered you because you're so bad.
Yeah, because I was so bad. And then I remember I had all this kind of journey in Leeds. I started going out, it was a great time, I was going out.
90s.
I was probably going out actually before I was thrown out. I was going out to, to bars and...
Great music scene at the time.
Yeah, but I was going out before I got thrown out of the house. I remember going to the teeny bopper night and then sneaking my way into town and going to all the nightclubs and stuff like that. I was 15, 16.
Again, crazy when we think about our own children,
my son,
isn't
I'll
it?
be like, wow.
Not a chance, mate.
No way. There's no way that he'd do that. But again, that social aspect. I wanted that social aspect. So yeah, sometimes it's hard to fit it all together and to stitch it all together. And then I remember at some point when I was about 18, I remember having to go back to Bradford where I was from.
Yeah.
So I dropped the Leeds thing.
So to live for a bit.
Yeah, I think something happened with where I was living, and I needed. I used to go. I had 4 or 5 places to live in the space of a year. I remember being like 16 to maybe probably until I went to uni. Really, I used to move around a lot, and I remember thinking I went back there for a little bit. Went back to my adoptive parents for a little bit.
To actually move back in.
I was working at the time. I was 18, so I was working.
Yeah.
Went to work in like a fire department in this chemical factory. Remember having money.
Yeah.
So I used to obviously pay money into the kitty and stuff. So I suppose I was, I was probably more welcome. I remember things being a lot more lenient and more. Cause I was working. I was an adult. Obviously, spent a bit of time with them, but I remember constantly thinking I don't belong here.
So you still had that feeling of...
I don't belong here. I'm not one of
otherness.
them. I'm not one of them.
Yeah.
I'm different. I want different things. I want something different. Again, I had friends out in the city, that were going out. Big going out culture. Friends from school, other friends. I was going out a lot. I was drinking. Getting up to mischief, but nothing like criminal. Just that social aspect was important. They were my family, if you like.
So how long did you stay there then?
Not long. It was less than a year.
Because what I'd love to know is how you got from there to where you got to in your career. Because you still haven't got any qualifications at this stage, have you? You haven't gone back to college or anything. No
qualifications. So when I was kind of 18, 19, I started wanting to... I was there for a bit and I thought, I don't want to stay here. This place isn't for me.
Yeah.
Bradford's a city, there's a lot good about Bradford, but there's a lot of racial tension. And I had one foot in each camp.
Yeah.
And I didn't really, knew where I fit there, if
it's
you know
hard,
what I mean.
I know.
I had friends that were, white friends that were Asian, and I didn't. I had one foot in each camp, I didn't really see where I fitted. And I remember kind of, wanting to get away. So I spent a summer in Newquay.
Okay.
1997, I was 19 then.
Lovely.
Away for the summer. Brilliant. Again, looking at a new...
Yeah.
I'd never been anywhere like that. I remember one of my friends was going there camping, and I decided to go with him.
Yeah.
Him and his girlfriend, and me and a friend from school. Can we come?
Yeah.
I remember us having this kind of really bad tent. It didn't even have any bottom on it or anything, but we took this tent, and it was... Anyway, we ended up staying for the summer because I just didn't
living in the tent.
I didn't want to be back in Bradford.
Yeah.
So that happened, and then I came back, and then stayed around for a bit. Got myself a flat and all that kind of stuff. I was 19 at the time, 20. Remember again thinking I need to get away. Went down to Bournemouth with a friend for the summer.
Okay.
Spent the summer there. Again, wanting to get away. I think everybody probably sensed that from me. I wasn't for here,
Yeah.
And then when I was 21, so 1999, I had this flat, decorated it all how I wanted it to be. It was a beautiful flat. I had it exactly where I wanted it to be, new sofa, new TV, everything. It was lovely, absolutely lovely place to live. I remember finishing it and thinking, I don't want to be here. I just don't want to be here. So I remember selling all my stuff.
Real restlessness, isn't it? Yeah.
Stuff. And then I went to America. A guy, one of my friends said to me, I want to go to Los Angeles.
Brilliant.
And I'd never even been on a plane before. And I said
this
to
was
him,
at what, 21?
21.
Yeah.
1999.
Yeah.
So I was partying like it was
Love
1999.
Of course. Great year.
We got the flight. Sells most of my stuff. Everyone's shocked. He's disappeared again.
Yeah.
Didn't tell anybody. Just me and my friend and a couple of other friends knew. I'd disappeared to Los Angeles.
Wow.
Spent
As you do.
Yeah, spent a good, couple of months in Los Angeles.
Were you working there?
Worked there,
yeah, so you were legal.
Not legally.
All right, I was
No,
going to say,
not legally. I was working in a hotel, staying in a hotel, making the beds, behind the bar.
Yeah.
Everything you can think of. This whole new world.
Yeah.
Met Jean-Claude Van Damme on the beach.
Oh my God.
I was going to the
how
Viper
exciting.
rooms. I was a lad from where I was from and my background and what had happened to me.
Yeah. You're thinking you've landed. I've made it.
Yeah. Again, met a girl from Ireland. Had to come back. We met this girl in a little friendship group. We had such a laugh. The start of a relationship, but it wasn't with any depth. You know. And then the girl that was one of the friends that was with this girl was on her way to Australia. So I comes back from America, 1999, 2000, and I follows this girl to Ireland.
Okay.
Knocks on her door. She didn't know I'm arriving.
Yeah.
Stays with a friend of theirs, in a shared house for a while. It didn't work out. We knew very quickly.
Yeah.
I've seen her for a month or so. It didn't work out. And then the girl of one of her friends had gone to Australia.
So you're getting notions now.
Yeah, I'm
to
getting
go
notions.
further
I'm thinking,
afield.
I would love to. I didn't know anything about Australia. Neighbours, home and away.
Yeah.
What every
That's
kid really
yeah.
knows about Australia. But yeah, so I comes back from Ireland. Again, nowhere to live really.
Yeah.
Staying on friends' couches, being on this adventure. Comes back to my adoptive parents have won the lottery.
Won the lottery?
They've won the lottery.
No way.
Yeah, they've won. They've got 6 numbers.
What are the odds?
11 million to 1.
There you go.
They've won the lottery.
Mad.
Yeah. They've won this lottery, £600,000, something like that they won, just short of.
Wow.
Won it on a Wednesday, so there were a couple of people. So they've made the decision while I'm in Ireland. Obviously, I've had no contact with them. I had very little contact with them because I didn't want to be there really. But every now and again, I'd make contact. They've shared the money with my adoptive sister. I didn't get anything.
What?
Yeah. So they got
another rejection, essentially, isn't it?
Another rejection. So when I went back, I knew what it took to get to Australia. So when I went back, obviously they'd bought the houses, they'd moved to Blackpool. Or, tried to open up a shop and something like that. And anyway, it didn't work out. But my sister got a house and I got nothing. So I remember going with my begging bowl and saying, I need £2,000. I want to go to Australia.
Oh, for the flight?
For the you had to have £2,000.
Oh, of course, in your bank. Yeah.
So I'm moving to Australia. And luckily I got the money. It was small fries really compared to what.
Yeah.
But that was a real like the bus stop.
Yeah, that's
in
another
Leeds.
bus stop moment.
Leeds. That was the bus stop moment for me. It was a real shift in, where I, wanted to go. And it was all wanting to get away, find myself,
escape,
meet new people. And I think travelling, whether it's Bournemouth, Newquay, Blackpool, wherever it is, Australia, it opens up your horizons.
Well, you know me, I'm the same. I've travelled all over.
It opens
as well.
up your horizons.
Yeah, definitely. It gives you a perspective. It gives you a fresh perspective.
Yeah.
It kind of shocks you out of your daily mundane,
And I always knew I wanted
rituals.
to do something.
Yeah. So something beyond what you were doing?
Yeah. Still no qualifications, by the way. Still not a GCSE to my name.
Did you know that you wanted to work in a school or with children or do something with kids who were like you?
I went to Australia. The jobs I had, I worked in a recruitment agency. I worked in finance. I worked for an agency that somebody had that I used to go in there and be the person that would do any type of job.
So nothing to do with education.
Nothing to do with education. I was a bin man. I was a caretaker.
Wow.
I worked in a factory, loads of different factories. I worked in offices. I worked all the time because I knew I had to get that money. Yeah,
you get your money.
I got the money, and it wasn't about getting as much money. It was getting money to survive and money to have a half decent standard of living.
So was there something in Australia that made you, because you're obviously not in Australia now?
No.
So was there something there that prompted you to come back here and then get into the field that you're in?
Yeah, I asked, I used to meet people. I lived in a shared house, a shared flat. I went to Sydney. One of the best years in my life.
Yeah.
Really. One of the best years that I've had. I met a lot of people that were travelling, that I'm still friends with now.
Yeah.
Emma and Pete and Dave and, loads Kirsty, I'm friends with them now still. And that's important to me, is, you know, those friendships.
Yeah.
We might not always have as much contact as we could, but still, you know, you remember good times.
Yeah, they're core friends.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And a lot of those people were on gap years from university.
Okay.
I'd never even thought about university.
Right.
Again, to fit in, to show that I was kind of part of things.
Yeah.
I used to tell little white lies, say, yeah, I'm just on a gap year.
Okay.
I'm at uni. I'm doing this. And what I remember about it was, I'm 22, 23, by the way. I remember people not really questioning me about it. I think they probably knew, but they never kind of questioned.
They didn't want to hurt your feelings.
But yeah, I mean, I had a fantastic year in Australia. Best year of my life.
Yeah.
Partying, the sun, you know, met some fantastic friends.
Yeah.
Just brilliant, you know, what a brilliant year. You know, the lifestyle just fitted in with me, and I was just this young lad from Bradford, really, you know, living this kind of dream. Obviously worked while I was there as well. Spent the whole year, the maximum amount of time I could there, and then I had to leave. So yeah, it was one of those situations where when I got back from Australia, I just had this notion. I remember feeling so depressed when I got back, so down.
Yeah,
I'd
that
come
makes
back
sense.
from this kind of
Sunshine.
heaven to me. Yeah, just this
Joy.
I had a great job. I travelled around, did all that stuff, and then I remember thinking, well, okay, I'm back now. I've got no qualifications. Why not? Why can't I go to? I met loads of people that have been on university.
Why not? Yeah.
They're no different to me.
Exactly.
I lived with them. They're no different to me.
I love that you saw that.
I saw that, yeah.
So you thought, what else is possible?
What else is possible? So when I came back, in my head, I was like, I'm going to go to university.
And did you decide at that point that you were going to go into education or
No.
teaching?
Well, no, not really. Because I had no GCSEs, I had no A-levels. So I went and spoke to somebody. I went to a college. Because when I came back from Australia, I moved very quickly to Leeds.
Right.
Back to somewhere where I thought,
where you knew.
I cannot go back to Bradford.
No way. Yeah.
Even though I've got friends there, even though I just couldn't go back there.
You knew you'd outgrown it completely.
Yeah, completely. So I went to Leeds, and I went to a college, Thomas Danby College in Leeds on Round Hay Road. And I got speaking to the person, said, well, you're going to have to do your GCSEs. Mm-hmm. And I was like, right, okay. So that's kind of what I did. And again, I had a fantastic English tutor. I couldn't do my maths at the same time because I just thought it's too much. And I was avoiding maths because I thought, I don't really like it. I'm not really. So I went into kind of to do the English GCSE. I had a fantastic tutor that just invested in me. Again, like Maureen from the college, like some other, positive female role models that I've had. I decided to do the course, and I left that course after a year. Was living in Leeds, going out and stuff, partying, connecting with the friends that I'd had previously, going back to Bradford a little bit. I ended up getting an A star.
An A star?
An A star in English.
Amazing.
Yeah.
That's hard. I'm an English teacher.
Yeah.
You don't give out many A stars. So
No.
there's definitely an exceptional
Absolutely.
talent that you had there from when you were little.
Yeah.
It's now coming out to the fore. And when you've got an A star in English, I believe you can do anything.
Yeah.
Because you're an excellent communicator.
Yeah. Well, yeah.
So that really stood to you. It is so, isn't it?
Yeah,
The English is essential.
But it was somebody investing in me. And it
Investing.
was them saying to me, you can do it.
And you then seeing that evidence. There's your self-efficacy loop.
Yeah.
There's your self-esteem now growing.
Yeah. Well, that was the first step, wasn't it? That was, well, if I can achieve that, why can't I achieve that?
Absolutely.
So on the back of that, I remember that I said this fantastic tutor and she did invest in me. On the back of that, I was like, what's next?
What's
So
next?
then started looking at colleges, universities, understood that there was this thing called a foundation degree. You didn't actually need any qualifications to get on it. So I looked at this foundation degree. I looked at different places, and for some reason this one at Durham University caught my eye. So I spoke to them, did all that stuff, because travelling gave me those skills. Mm-hmm. Where do I need to go? Who do I need to speak
Confidence,
to? Confidence,
yeah.
So I remember
problem solving.
Exactly.
Brilliant.
I remember speaking to them about it, and they said, look, you won't get on this degree course with your qualifications that you've got. I had one GCSE to my name.
But it was still an A star.
But if you do this, if you do this foundation degree, you will get onto one of our degrees.
Incredible.
So I remember moving up to Stockton-on-Tees.
Yeah.
Again,
Another move.
I moved from Leeds to Stockton-on-Tees, and I was there for a year.
Yeah.
I had a fantastic year there. I met I'm still friends with people there now, Lorraine and Graham. Still friends with them now, lived in a little shared house, and on Jason as well, one of my other friends. This is like friends who I'm kind of naming on the podcast. Still friends with them now, and still connected. did this foundation degree. It was kind of an interdisciplinary one, so sociology, psychology, adaptation to the environment, anthropology.
Oh, it sounds fun. It sounds
really interesting stuff. And that helped me to understand me more as well, you know,
the
society,
psychology especially, and where you fit.
You know, where me as a person, you know.
Because that thing that was lost, that identity piece you're finding.
Yes, definitely finding,
And is it from that you're realising, actually, I've got a skill here.
Yeah.
I could help other people.
Yeah.
Because the thing is, you could have gone on to do anything, clearly, but you decided to channel all your energy into turning around and finding those people who were lost and left behind. That little boy who you were, there was nobody there to advocate for you.
No.
And you've chosen to go down a path where you are a very strong advocate for kids just like that. Is that what drove you to that?
There's probably a few more stages after that, I think, that led to it. And I know we're kind of time limited, aren't we?
Yeah.
And, you know, we said before, didn't we? This might be a two-part.
I think this will have to be a two-part, really, so. Because we've only scratched the surface of you going down your career path.
Absolutely, yeah.
Because your background, your childhood, is so complex.
Yes, yeah.
And you've gone through something. But what is coming through, is just resoundingly, is that you have changed. You have channeled your pain and you've turned it into purpose.
Yes. Yeah.
You know? And I think that, to me, epitomizes what we call in psychology post-traumatic growth.
Okay.
You are the epitome of post-traumatic growth.
Yeah.
And what you've done is, instead of, you know, allowing it to control you, you've taken back the reins.
Do you know what? I always refused to do that. And I looked at other people and I was like, you've got to look forward. Resilience is a big word for me. Yeah. It's an important word to me.
Yeah, and me too.
And it's something I think that I've developed over time.
Yeah.
Maybe I've always had it.
I think you've always had it. Yeah.
I mean, from a story point of view as well, I went to, obviously, you know, maybe this is something we can talk in more detail. I went to university. What happened at university? Yeah. Obviously, you know, my life, you know, I've got a wife and I've got children.
Yeah.
And, you know, what happened in my life later on, my relationship with my mum as well.
I think,
you know,
I think it would be really good also to actually have a look at what you do to look under the cover of a day in your life and what you do, because I know you through safeguarding.
Yes.
And I know you through the role that you have, which is an incredibly responsible role for the trust, the entire trust.
Yeah.
And what you do there. So maybe we can reconvene.
Absolutely.
In the next session.
I think we should.
You know, because I think we've come to a natural end.
Yes.
If we leave it here and then come back in the next episode for part 2 and really dig deeper, have a deep dive into what is it like to be you now, what you do now, and what agencies you work with, and you know how you've got to be where you are in the trust, because
I think that's
it is remarkable.
Isn't it?
It's remarkable. We can't rush over that.
No.
And it's very important, because you are a beacon of hope to so many.
Yeah.
And as a result of what you do, you enable people like me to come in and support people and become another beacon of, you know, you've got little, I call them constellations of hope.
Yes.
But different people who
and it's those social networks, isn't it? You know? But you know, I'm obviously I'm happy to talk about any of this, and I think, you know, the life that I've got now, you know, and you know, ultimately people will see that it's, you know, it is a success story.
It's a real hero's journey.
Yeah,
it's real.
There's a few years that we need to fill in,
and I think what to me it really rings true is that it keeps coming into my head when you're talking. It's a rising tide lifts all ships. Yeah. And that's what you're doing. Yeah. You're lifting those around you.
I think my work is incredibly important.
It is.
And there's some reason why I've fallen into that. But like you say, we'll
dig into it
in depth into that. And
next time.
Right.
Well, listen, it's been incredible. Your story is absolutely remarkable, and I know it's going to have touched so many people.
Well, that's the hope.
So thank you so much for sharing. Thank you for inviting me to talk to you about this, because I feel very honoured.
Oh, you're welcome.
To be in that position. It's very moving.
What better than a positive psychologist like yourself?
There you go.
You know, but no, I'm that's what I want to do. I want people in some way to learn from.
Yeah.
That's what the podcast is about. That's who I'm going to be speaking to.
Brilliant project.
You know, it's people that have experienced similar things. We've all got our different story, but they've experienced similar things to myself. But as a result, they're helping other people.
Yeah.
That's the whole premise of the podcast.
It's all about growth and help. Yeah. Well, thank you very much, Steve.
Oh, you're welcome.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome. I'll see you next time.
See you next time for part 2.
Yeah, thank you. Cheers. Thanks everybody for listening to the Great in You podcast. We really appreciate your support. Please like, subscribe and share, and the podcast will be available on Spotify, YouTube and all other social media platforms. Thank you so much. See you next time.